Okay, so one thing, fair or not, that YouTube and others in social video have to grapple with is this brand safety suitability question. There have been ups and downs in that journey the last couple of years. Where are things today in terms of being able to manage what you need and protect yourself without, going overboard, I guess?
Yeah, I think there are levels of it. It is still very complicated, especially in the video space, because the speed at which video is being uploaded onto these platforms and the difficulty sometimes to get a real understanding of the content that's inside of that is still a challenge. But there are areas of it that are more concerned and not. So we've moved a little bit between the difference between brand safety and brand suitability. So oftentimes brand suitability can just be around, is the content make sense to the message that I have out there on the brand values I have, all of that it's not necessarily not safe. It's just maybe I do or don't want to be in that content.
Axe body spray versus Johnson & Johnson, different levels or whatever.
Different levels, and understanding to your individual consumer target what's suitable to them and what do they love, and really understanding that is important. And then there's true brand safety, like something that is nefarious and bad. Yeah. That is always the bigger concern, is making sure that people are not unnecessarily running in front of content that they truly think it's nefarious or adjacent to. That's still an area that we spend a lot of time trying to block, manage, understand, stay away from, and try to make sure that we are minimizing any opportunity for that to happen. So one is really a research on what is suitable, and do you have an understanding of that, and do you have the right places put down where you want to be. And then the other one's true safety. And that's where we look at the platforms and then people like a Pixability on, can you make sure that our brand is not supporting something that got uploaded and maybe is not yet surfaced as tagged as being really, really, truly unsafe, and making sure we don't end up in those places.
We use multiple partners for brand safety. We use IAS. We also use Double Verify. And then we sometimes work with third-party partners like Pixability, who we ensure brand safety across the board, whether you're on your mobile device or you're on your big screen. So I think YouTube has been a leader in that space overall and has ensured that not only are brands like being served to the right consumer, that they're being done so in a safe way. Now, of course, that leaves it up to your agency to make sure they're checking those boxes for you. But at Media Plus, we're absolutely on top of that, and that's part of our general practice.
You made me think of this. Do you think the rest of CTV gets off the hook with brand safety? It's not UGC, so people don't worry about it, but it's wide open where your brand could end up.
Yeah, it honestly, it depends who you're working with. I'm going to be cautious about potentially naming some other partners, but there are some other large partners in this space that do not have guardrails. Yeah, not like YouTube and others. I would say, like, if you're working with Disney, the Disney streaming services have the same guardrails as a YouTube would. Yeah, but there are definitely some large partners in the space that do not have those guardrails up quite yet.
Yeah, it's funny. I think on one hand, you got to look at those time spend numbers and say, well, someone thinks the content's good. Yeah, right? You can't hate on it too much.
No one's being forced to be there, right?
Exactly, especially on your TV screen where you have a lot of other options to go down. I will say on the brand safety front, it definitely depends on the client, and it more so depends on the client comfortability than it does on the YouTube ecosystem. I also think there has to be a right sizing with the cost of brand safety. We work with a lot of great companies here at Noble, and they help provide brand safety and suitability, but the cost isn't cheap, and it's not cheap to ensure that brand safety on these platforms. So it's really about, in an election year, it's important to mitigate some of that risk. For a lot of different verticals, it's important to mitigate that risk. But when it comes at the expense of reach, when it comes at the expense of impact, that's when we really have to take a hard look client by client and say, is it making an incremental impact on the brands we work for?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You mentioned it's, part of the appeal of YouTube for certain brands is that you can get it in a reasonable price. Well, you don't want the brand safety tax to kind of ruin that deal, right? That's kind of pull away from what you're trying to do.
And you can't put a price on a CMO reading an analytics report saying, hey, my brand was on there. At the same time, I do think YouTube and Google has taken a lot of steps towards ensuring brand safety since a lot of those reports have come out. And again, it just comes down to a case-by-case basis.
I've personally been in front of clients 7, 8-figure clients that specifically were in the midst of some of these major brand safety boycott issues in years past. So I can say that the temperature has gone down from those days. I nevertheless think that when you look at the connected television ecosystem as a whole, and you're strategizing your targeting and your placements, and you say, okay, here's a portion that we're going to put into Disney's umbrella of inventory, and here's some that we're going to place into Netflix, and even some other vMVPDs like Sling or Fasts like Pluto and Tubi. Even though there have been improvements that I think are noticeable in the Google YouTube ecosystem, it still pales in comparison to what is without doubt a much cleaner, safer ecosystem.
It feels pretty foolproof compared to the wide open nature of a web platform.
And I think that's just the nature of UGC. It's just so much harder, supposedly, to police versus professionally produced content that's coming out of traditional production channels.
I think you look at it in some of the different investments that they're making, as well as some of the practices. So when I talk about investments, something as basic as buying Sunday Ticket and having a product like that, which is not something that you would normally have expected YouTube 5 years ago.
That's a legitimizer, right? Like,
it's wild that it was, that it came up and how it's being done. I think when you think about it from a brand safety perspective, you see tools like the Content Suitability Center, some of the things that you have access to in Google Ads. You start to see more control about where things appear, how they appear, better alignment with brand value. And then, over time, what you're starting to see is consumer trust in some of the different ways that people are leaning into the idea of consumer trust. Consumers very much not only align what they want to watch, but what they expect to see and surround it.
Right.
And YouTube has to recognize that advertisers will only follow where eyeballs go. And so there has to be this association around safety. There has to be this association around structure, because they're not just the scrappy UGC, information consolidator. They are having, millions and millions and millions of hours daily being uploaded that is professional content.
Yep.
And so they have to find ways in how they are curating experiences, both for consumers, but also then bringing to advertisers so that they can be smart and sophisticated, so that they can make claims on those dollars.